You're listening to The Psychedelic Couch. Before we delve into today's episode, which includes conversation around psychedelics, we want to remind our listeners that the use of illicit drugs carries significant risks and legal consequences. Psychedelic substances, including but not limited to LSD, psilocybin, DMT and MDMA, are classified as illegal in many countries, including here in the UK. The possession, distribution and consumption of these substances can result in legal penalties, including fines and imprisonment. Furthermore, the use of psychedelics can have profound effects on one's mental and physical health. While some individuals report positive experiences, such as expanded consciousness and therapeutic benefits, others may experience negative effects, such as anxiety, paranoia, and psychosis. These substances can also interact unpredictably with medications and exacerbate underlying mental health conditions. They are also not suitable for anyone under the age of 25. It's essential to approach the topic of psychedelics with caution and responsibility. The views and experiences shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only and should not be interpreted as encouragement or advocacy for the use of illegal substances. If you or someone you know is struggling with substance abuse, we encourage you to seek support from qualified healthcare professionals or local addiction support services. With that said, let's proceed with today's episode, keeping in mind the importance of informed discussion and harm reduction. Mayan medicine is an integrated system of natural medicine and healing that sprung from the Mayan civilization over 2,500 years ago. The Mayan medical system centers around restoring and maintaining health between the 5 elements of earth, water, fire, wind, and space, and balancing the relationship between the seen and the unseen worlds. Roland has practiced as a Maya healer for 28 years in Mexico and the UK. He trained in the highlands of Chiapas and on completing his apprenticeship opened a clinic in Dar es Salaam, whilst also studying Tibetan Buddhism. He connects the Mayan and the Tibetan worlds of medicine and healing, with emphasis on the use of ceremonies, meditation and shamanic practices used in these traditions. Welcome, Roland.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for talking to me today.
Well, I thought maybe you could start by just telling us a little bit more about your journey and about Maya medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. My journey began in Mexico when I went as a student to study Spanish as part of my degree course, and I lived in Mexico City for a year. And every weekend, a friend and I would get in a car and we'd just drive randomly to different places, little villages and hilltop towns and places. And what struck me was the warmth and the openness of the Mexican people. I mean, it was absolutely amazing. We would turn up into these little villages. Somebody would be having a wedding and they would immediately just open the door and say, come and join. Somebody would be doing a ceremony, come join. And I'd never experienced that level of openness and warmth and love from a different sort of culture. And I found that the more humble and the poorer the people were, the kind of more generous they were and the more they would offer. And so I was going through a time in my life where obviously I was transitioning from having grown up in Kent and doing the conventional things of school, university, and then discovering this completely new world that had intact almost these ancient indigenous cultures. There are at least 80 languages spoken in Mexico. There are 30 Mayan languages still spoken. And the history, the culture, the medicine, the practices, the ceremony, the magic, the healing is alive today and has obviously come from a very long line of tradition that the Spanish conquest could not stamp out. It certainly hybridized a lot of the practices, but that spirit and that tradition and that culture is still very much alive. And I was in my early 20s, and I had my own experience back sort of growing up in Kent, where I felt very sort of isolated from my own culture in terms of my own experience of the non-physical world. I found it very difficult to connect to my own culture with relation to the non-physical nature of the world. And when I got to Mexico, I kind of found my spiritual home, because here was people and a place and a culture that highly valued the connection between the non-physical, the physical, and the healing, life as healing, community as healing, ceremony as healing, people as healing, in a way that I'd never really experienced in my own culture before. So when I graduated in London, I went straight back to Mexico, and within a matter of months, I found myself literally in Chiapas, in San Cristobal. I'd been taken on as an apprentice to a Mayan healer. It just happened literally like that. I just walked in one day to his healing center, and he said, "Oh, you're late." You know, he'd been sort of waiting for me, and it just came in that time in my life that I was really open and ready to immerse myself as deeply and as fully in that culture as I could. And I stayed with him, with Lauro, for about 5 years, running the center with him and attending to the Mayan population and the Mestizo population. And we would run our little center in the hills outside San Cristobal. And we basically had a little wooden house with a little altar space in, and people would come from sort of far and wide. Actually, and started working with Lauro and all this energy and light and dark, and trying to navigate the two worlds of the physical and the non-physical, going in to do exorcisms and house blessings, and then treating a lot of patients who were suffering from the ill effects of black magic. It felt very familiar ground, because that is in fact what I've been doing my entire life without realizing it, purifying energies and working with the raw materials of the elements and the energetic worlds that connect us to our ancestors and the spirit world and all sentient beings. All of this energy has to converge somewhere, and it converges in our physical bodies, right? In our dreams, in our visions, in our relationships, in our activities. This world that we live in is a world of energy and color and ceremony, whether we know it or not. And all these unconscious forces are bubbling up within us from very deep places. And it takes us a long time to understand, who we are, where we're coming from, and why these energies are there, and what is our role in this life. How can we work with these energies to liberate them from a place of pain and woundedness and trauma, and can transform them into a place of kind of wisdom and compassion and loving kindness. Ultimately, that's, for me, the purpose of life, is to transform the raw and the rugged qualities, of suffering and pain into expressions of joy and compassion. There's a way to do it, and we all have to find our own path. This was my path, and in a few words.
So there was something then about being in Mexico and having that kind of noetic sense that you were in the right place to be able to unfold what it was in you that you had experienced your whole life under the tutelage of the shaman that you were working with.
That's exactly right. I mean, ultimately, we spent many years, serving the Mayan community, not just in the center, but around the villages. And I spent a lot of time in the Mayan, in the Lacandon rainforest with the Lacandon Maya, who had essentially ran away when the Spanish arrived. They basically ran away and hid in the Lacandon jungle, and they were able to practice their Mayan culture undisturbed, like for hundreds of years, and they still had their Mayan god temples. They were not Christianized. They had their god houses and made their mead and had their incense and ceremonies. It was absolutely amazing to spend time with the Lacandon Maya. And in fact, they invited me for to heal some of their the members of their community, and that's how I got involved with the Lacandon Maya. And again, that was another whole experience of seeing how one could navigate one's way from the physical to the non-physical and back again.
When I was thinking about our conversation today, I was thinking about how sweat lodges have grown in popularity. It's, I don't know, a piece that I'd like to know more of. I've never experienced one myself. I regularly use a sauna, probably 4 times a week, and really enjoy that. And it's very much part of my self-care, especially at the end of the day. Just having that time to really, I can feel my muscles, the breath. I use the breath to really unfurl. Emotions often come up. You know, it's a very special, sacred experience for me. But I know little about sweat lodges, so I'd love you to tell me and the audience more about that, about them and their sort of ceremonial ritual, the intention setting, the importance of community.
What's fascinating about sweat lodges is that versions of them exist pretty much everywhere, from the Mesoamerican culture from which we have the Temescal, the North American Indians of the EP or the sweat lodge. About 120 sweat lodges in Ireland in just one small village, still standing, made of stone.
I know, but did the Celts,
Yeah, yes,
very
absolutely.
ancient, yeah.
We're talking about a primordial practice of heat and steam bathing that I think every culture has its own creation myth, right? And its own story about where the lodge comes from, and or the sauna or the the heat house. In terms of the Maya sweat lodge, or Temescal, we call it, Mayan civilization came really from older civilizations, the old Toltecs and the Old Tecs. So we're going back, into the sort of mists of time. Pre-classic Maya civilization is anywhere from like 1,000 BC to about the birth of Christ, and then the classic is from naught to about 700. Then the late classic is when the Mayan civilization starts to decline. And certainly I mean, the oldest sweat lodges I've seen have been in places like Palenque in Chiapas, where they're built of cut limestone, and in terms of the Mayan tradition, they're part of that. I would say they're like a portal into the underworld. So they're places where people go to really enter the underworld, and for the Mayans, the underworld was a very important place because that's the place that they could talk to their ancestors. So I think the universality of the sweat lodges and the symbolism of it is essentially, I think, the same wherever you go. It's a ceremony that investigates the nature of the play of the elements. So that's earth, that's the ground on which you sit. The earth is your physical body and your bones. The earth is your tradition and your relationships. Then water is the sort of nectar of life, in a way, the energetic flow through which we experience everything. Then fire is the creative spark, the life force energy. Air is the way that we communicate with the world by through breathing. And then it all has to happen somewhere, which is space, emptiness, right? So a sweat lodge essentially is an empty space. It's a nothing. It's a space where we can enter into a place where we can come into contact with our maybe true selves and communicate with the energies that are operating deep within us, and the energies operating around us. Some sweat lodges are round. The Mayan ones are rectangle. Some are built under the ground. There are a million different types of how you can build one, the materials, according to the tradition, the culture. and even they vary from sort of village to village. I think everyone would agree that the space of the lodge represents the womb of Mother Earth. I think everyone would agree on that, and that that space is a female space, as the womb is a female space, and it's the place of birth,
Mm.
place that birth happens.
Yeah, and aren't they often used as a birthing, that a woman will enter with a newborn baby and that it becomes that almost integration from, being in her body out into the world.
Absolutely. I mean, interestingly, so in the Mayan culture, I mean, especially certainly the Highland Maya, a lot of the Mayan Maya have sweat houses in their gardens, and they use them as well for washing and ceremonies and healings, but also for childbirth. So some women even give birth inside the lodge or go into the lodge after to sort of cleanse mother and child after birth. And then that birth lodge becomes very important for the baby. So they have somewhere to come back home to if they get sick later in their life. So the lodge is represents the womb of the earth, a place of regeneration and birth, and also death, and transformation. And I think everyone would agree that it's a place of purification where these elements that I've mentioned come together to create an environment in which the community can open together and heal. So the space itself is a very powerful catalyst in one's healing process, so that the the warmth, the moisture, the darkness, that you're sitting on the ground, the contact with the earth, the contact with your fellow humans, the contact with the ancestors and the non-physical beings, the contact with the plants and animal life, the contact with one's spirituality, one's deep sense of search in this life. What are we searching? We're searching for ourselves, right?
Yeah, and it's so powerful when you say that, because having spent time talking to these wonderful people, conducting these interviews, I come back each time to this importance of community. And I think about, my work in clinical practice as a psychotherapist, often with couples, but also with individuals, and just this emphasis on the individual. And is that where we're going wrong? There's this epidemic of mental health suffering, mental health conditions. And is that actually more this searching, this longing for reconnection, this longing to know oneself, the longing to know oneself in community, to have that reflected back to us? And I notice as I say that, I get goosebumps that feels like the piece that's so missing for all of us in the West.
I think, what is it, modern man in search of the soul. A lot of us are searching for that, almost that forgotten or hidden part of ourselves that is there. We know it's there, but we're trying to reach it. We're trying to reconnect with ourselves, as you say, in a much broader sense of how can we return to our basic goodness as human beings to really expand into our full potential in this life to serve this world and 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 transcend the ego's grasp. And I think that's the key, isn't it? If we can close the gap and open up the parts of ourselves emotionally, energetically, psychologically, physically, mentally, that are shrouded in kind of fear, whether that's cultural or through our cultural conditioning or our trauma or challenge of stepping into the unknown, uncomfortable. then I think there's a way for us to break free of our fear-based patterns, and our ancestral patterns and our karmic ones, to realize we're here for a very short moment, and that we must use this life, this precious human life, in the best way we can to bring healing to this world and uplift the vibrations, because this world has problems, and is dying, and we need to regenerate and find creative ways of restoring sanity and well-being to this world. And we might have to look within ourselves for the answers.
Mm. Yeah, perhaps we look there first, and in doing that, nurturing our own garden, it sort of spreads out.
Absolutely. I mean, back to the lodge, I think the power of the lodge is also when you go into that darkness, you're going into your own darkness, into your own, I call it the mountain, but the place in you that's not a physical place, but the place within you that is built up of these many lifetimes and many memories and many experiences and layers of emotion and experience that are compacted together. And through the breathing and the warmth and the nurturing female kind of guardianship of the lodge, and the driving force of the heat and the steam and the energy and the help from all the non-physical beings, we're able to separate these layers one by one, breath by breath, begin to open ourselves and realize that all of our defensive layers, they need to be surrendered before we can really open and experience that sense, as you said, of the bigger picture. How can we connect to all sentient beings? How can we transcend the fear of our aloneness, of our pain? And we realize we are all in the same pain. We're all suffering from the same things, and we can all find medicine within that experience, and realize that the traumas and the challenges of life are there for our growth and for our enlightenment. We start, the Tibetans say that we're all born sick. Whether we're manifesting any disease or condition or not, we're all born with imbalances, and life is a process of almost being thrust into our imbalances and then learning how we're going to work with those. And that's what comes out in the lodge. Our elemental constitution is immediately apparent as soon as we walk in, and as I said, all of those layers begin to separate, and the energy drives through us, opening out those Pandora's boxes.
Tell me about facilitation, because I'm thinking, as you say, as you walk in, you know instantly. Is that you, the participant, knows, or you, the facilitator, or how much involvement do you, as the facilitator, have in holding that space?
Well, I think it's a great question, because again, I think these are very difficult distinctions, because I think it's on one level, Jung talked about the universal unconscious, right? And the fact that at some place in all of our mind is the same information. It's like, if you imagine like the oceanic consciousness, that we all have within us the history of the entire world. Now, how can we transcend our little piece of that and swim down to the bottom of the ocean? And I think that's when you're in the sweat lodge, it's akin to that. You're in an ocean, and you experience the participants' energies as they experience yours in a way of almost it's like a sixth sense. So I can only speak for myself, but I think there's an awareness of the processes that are going on within oneself deeply, but also an awareness of the processes of everyone present, physically and non-physically. So obviously for me, it's sort of second nature in a way, because I've been doing it for so long. that I don't really have to think about it, but I can certainly feel what the participants are going through, and gently guide them towards the place that they're trying to get to. So, as we know, we hold our emotions and deep within. When you come into the lodge, they immediately start springing open. The pain, the trauma, the grief, the anger, whatever, the rejection, right? The rejected aspects of ourself are presented to oneself on entry. And then off we go through the rounds, and we see how we get on, how we're going to relate to those parts of ourselves that we don't really want to acknowledge. But through the breathing and the steam and the meditation, the songs, the storytelling, the sharing, the different rituals and practices we do there is a sense of being able to access those parts of ourselves that we really need to access. And going into a very uncomfortable place, we physically, and a place that we can't control, we also have to kind of let go of our own control and go into those very uncomfortable parts of ourselves that sit beneath the defense systems, but they all begin to break open in the lodge. And we have to learn a lot of kindness, I think, a lot of love for ourselves. Like, how am I going to, where do I start? How can I work with this energy? How can I begin to love myself when I don't know how to go about doing that? How can I connect to my basic goodness? How can I see everyone around me as a mirror, reflecting back to me what I'm feeling, what I'm living? The experience that we all have as individuals, I think, is also a collective experience that we're all having.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And tell me a little bit about intention setting and then integration afterwards. Is that done again in community or?
Yeah, so before we enter the lodge, we always prepare some offerings and conduct a fire ceremony, not just to heat the rocks, which we call them the ancestors or the grandfathers or the abuelos or the grandmothers. They represent the kind of bones of the earth, essentially. Not just our ancestors, but the physical earth element. This represents the kind of steadfast and immovable nature, essentially, of our basic goodness. As we heat the ancestors, we also think about, what we can offer, what can we offer this world? Which part of ourselves can we give up? If we want to receive something, we need to make space in ourselves to be able to receive something. So what part of ourselves are we going to give up? So I think the intention setting around the fire is very much trying to connect with the fraudulent, the non-grounded, neurotic, judgmental, shameful aspects of our experience. And we have to be willing to give those up if we're going to be able to receive any medicine, because otherwise everything that will come in will just be contaminated by the poison within, right? So we have to give up something. And I think depending on our moment in our life, the exact time we go into a lodge or a ceremony, we'll all have specific challenges that relate to our journey, right? And so I think at that entry point, we have to try and understand, like, where am I in this moment in my life? What is it I need to give up and to allow for space? What is it I need to cultivate in my life to allow me to reach my full potential? And also, how can I serve the world? How can I help? Setting the intention before we go in is like extremely important, and also to honor the space itself, honor the elements and the goddesses that guard the elements, and the beings of in the six realms, the seven directions. The space, as I said, is there so that we can discover who we are and heal as individuals and communities. So I think the intention setting is very strong and important. And what's very interesting is that when we're in the lodge, and the lodge has its own agenda. And we can go in with one intention that's very clear and strong, and immediately the energy within the lodge says, listen, we're not doing that today. We're going to go over here. So we have to continually like adapt and be spontaneous and relate to the energy on the ground, not what's in our mind. And then post lodge, as I said, all of these layers begin to kind of unfurl and unfold, and we experience a sense of, as we come out of that lodge, of kind of being reborn back into the world with a renewed sense of kind of joy and purpose and inspiration. And then we'll go home, and then that night we'll dream, and maybe that night we will dream of something that happened to us a long time ago that we are still holding. And so the process of integration post lodge, I'd say, takes, maybe weeks, months, years. So it impacts us on a very powerful way, and it's depending on how open we are and how much we surrender and let go. The lodge will take us on a journey. It may not be the journey that we wanted to go on, but it's the journey that we're on.
Yeah, the journey that we need, the work that we need to do.
Definitely. We think we know what we need, but so much is driven by ego's idea of things rather than what we really need. I think the lodge is a great leveler because it will bring us back to really where we are, which is where this state of mind, this state of body, and this state of heart, this experience now, that's where we are. And that's what we have to work with. The lodge will bring us back to that very almost physical reality of like, you have to breathe here. You have to relax. You can't control what will happen. Let yourself go, drop deep beneath the ground and have a conversation with the earth. Listen also, it's about listening. And so certainly in my lodges, there's a lot of quiet space, silence to allow participants to really go into the deepest possible place they can go into, where that rational mind, the monkey mind, is not jumping around trying to dictate the show, but rather we can cut through that and experience what we really feel really happening and what's really important in our lives, because as I said, life is so short and we're always playing catch up with yesterday's emotions or experiences. And so the lodge really wakes us up into that nowness of, actually, I need to process now. I need to breathe now. I need to live my life now, not plan for the future. So the integration, it takes time. And I always recommend people to come over a period of time to the lodges, because if you could just come to one, then all this energy is thrown up and you kind of don't know what to do with it. But like any practice, it's, if you come regularly, then you can settle down and begin to work with the light and the dark and mum and dad and, your grief and your joy and your wounding, and how you're going to address your life and how you're going to relate to the world.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Absolutely. It takes time, and it takes kind of consideration in the integration, not kind of jumping from one ceremony to the next, but actually allowing what's come up to really settle, to really make meaning and integrate those changes, learnings, and wisdoms, right?
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, it's it takes a long time. Like, healing is a long journey. It's really the journey of a lifetime. And in fact, the slower we go, the better, really. That's a nice thing about all these healing practices is, slow down, breathe, drop into your body, into your breathing, into your emotional body, into your energetic body. Take your time. I mean, I think we're often in so much of a hurry to want to get well. I want to heal this. I've done with my trauma. I want to move on now and experience something else. But unfortunately, that experience is ongoing. It's like a continuity. Like until we finish with this experience, we're not going to have another one. It's be the same one going around and around. So if we can expand our our energy space and our kind of working space to allow that experience to grow within us and not judge it, but see like sadness is part of life, grief is part of life, trauma is part of life, rebirth is part of life. I always say to people, we have to break ourselves down many times in life and then rebuild again, break down again. And certainly in the lodge, we try to strip away all the inauthenticity, all of the masks and the layering, and break ourselves down to sort of basic, just, sitting on the ground and breathing and feeling a sense of dignity and openness and humility and respect and love for ourselves and this world and companions and partners and family members, and realize we're all trying to find the answers.
And as you say, just surrendering with the experience that we're having in any given moment, just noticing this is me experiencing deep sadness or grief or whatever it is, not pushing it away, just diving into it, being in it. What one of the ladies that I interviewed, Valentina, talked about, be Shiva having that experience, I am God experiencing the deepest grief. So I'm going to go into it and I'm going to explore all of it in all of its deep suffering. That is part of life. Rather than the tendency we have to push away this, we naturally push away the stuff we don't want, and we want the pleasurable things to bring towards us. But actually, there's something extremely freeing, isn't there, in just sitting in the reality of what is, and just surrendering, letting go of the control, just allowing it to unfold as it's meant to.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's so much emphasis on our civilization, isn't it? Everything up, right? Everything jacked up, everyone very positive, very up, and it's almost an exaggeration of something very neurotic. And when any healing practice, you have to go down. When you go into the lodge, you're going down into the earth, you're going down into a place where you've stored all this stuff, and you need to spend time there with, as you say, like not trying to get away from the experience, but try to go to those places of deep pain within you and with loving kindness. And if you can spend enough time there with loving kindness, then automatically those places will become places of power and wisdom and medicine and learning. But we have to go there. It's referred to as the manure of existence. Yeah, all the negativity of the world. We work with it and spread it back on the field for the plants to grow. So there's no aspect of our experience which we need to reject. The enemy is not out there. It's the enemy is inside us, and so friend. And I think sitting on the ground and making friends with ourselves, we can open to ourselves, open to the world, and begin to work through the kind of the raw and rugged aspects, and the uncomfortable, repressed or buried parts of ourselves that we find so, terrifying. It's about integrating, I think, all of these things into our daily practice. The way of the lodge is, it's just a microcosm of the world and how to live in it and relate to the elements and ourselves and respect other beings, like whether physical and non-physical, and also respect our journey. It's like a unique journey for each of us. And we have to find our particular way, our approach to life that will speak to our true nature, that allow us to grow and expand and share our gifts, many gifts that we have. That's the most important thing.
Something I was reflecting on, can you discuss any cultural sensitivity or appropriation concerns related to the adoption of sweat lodge practices outside of traditional contexts?
Sure. I mean, I think this whole concept of cultural sensitivity and appropriation, I think one has to respect the culture that one's in. One has to respect the culture that one comes from. One has to respect that others may have different cultures, belief systems, traditions. And I think if we're practicing a tradition, then it's very important to make sure that we're very rooted in that tradition and that we have an affinity and an understanding and a sensitivity. I think when we take certain practices out of their tradition and practice them elsewhere, it's important that we do that, I think, with respect to that culture, and also to respect to the new culture that you're introducing that practice into. That belief systems are different, ideologies, how we deal with our emotions, how we speak, how we relate to each other. Authenticity is also very important because the traditions are handed down, aren't they, from generation to generation, but also from person to person. It's important that we embody the teachings, that we don't imitate or copy or try and transplant, but we actually work through ourselves and embody those teachings and express ourselves authentically in our way, according to who we are. I think if we respect all of those things, then I think we're okay. That's my view.
Are there any misconceptions that you come across about sweat lodges or?
Yeah, I mean, I think a common one is mistaking the sweat lodge for a sauna. So you've mentioned, you practice saunaing, which is fantastic. But I think the sweat lodge is a ceremonial purification that works at that sort of energetic, emotional level. And it's also part of a wider culture of, in my case, Maya medicine and healing. So it's important to understand the context of it being a place of, like a sacred place of healing, not just a hot space in which we're going to sweat. That's a common one. I mean, the other one is, I think maybe sometimes people will come thinking they're going to have a great time. The sweat lodge is a difficult place. It's challenging. You need unbending intent sometimes to get through the very thick and heavy emotions, and the heat and the cold of the river or the sea or whatever we have outside the lodge. And so it's a very challenging place, but to go through that challenge and to come out the other side is so uplifting and rewarding. It can be uplifting, but it can be also very painful because we're forced to go into those places that deep within us that are painful. So as I said, it's an empty space in which we experience ourselves as we are. I always recommend people to come for a series and make it a practice, because the first lodge is very difficult for everyone because you're dealing with a physical experience that it's dark, it's very hot, the door's shut, people may feel scared, they maybe have difficulty breathing, the heart is racing, emotions are coming, where there's nothing to cling on to, there's no security, there's no safety blanket within us. So it can be very unnerving and difficult. But after a while, we realize it's okay. It's just sit and breathe. You'll be fine. The door will open and we'll leave. We'll be fine. So I think it's important to know when you come to a sweat lodge, it's not a free ride. It's work.
I mean, are there any risks or health conditions that people need to be aware of before attending, or is there, an assessment done?
I mean, I would always say, meet the guide and talk to him or her and discuss where you are, and any medical issues you may have, to see if it's suitable for you to attend. I'd say the three most important ones are, pregnancy, that's a no, heart conditions, yeah, and circulatory conditions, or high blood pressure, epilepsy, psychosis. If you've got a history of, mental illness or etc., you have to tread very carefully. I always meet everyone individually first, and give them a diagnosis and a kind of session, just consultations, just to ascertain where they are, so that when they come to the lodge, I can really help them direct their practice towards where they need to go. But of course, it's important to go through this process, so that everyone is safe in the space. It may be okay if you have certain conditions, but again, you need to speak to the guide and make sure that, if you need to leave at any point, you just say, please can I leave, and the door's open. So you have to go at your own pace and respect your limits.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you which you wish I had? Or that I should?
No, I think you've asked me some great questions. I hope I've shed some light on the practice. But I'd say the most important thing is, is to find a practice that and a community that you connect to, that you resonate with, that you feel will nurture and support you. Be consistent. Like any practice, takes time. The healing takes a long time, and it's a long process. So take your time and surround yourself with good people who will support you in this life and bring you up.
Thank you so much. And Roland, just tell people where they can find you if they want to follow your work.
So it's mayamedicine.co.uk, MAYA medicine.co.uk, and we run a regular lodge down here in Shoreham in Kent every 2 or 3 weeks, and a beautiful farm called Filston Farm. The lodge is next to a river, so we're very, very blessed that we can come out between rounds and jump in the river, cool down, and come back. And then we're in Mexico every April in Oaxaca for a week's retreat with Mario and Cerro Largo. Yeah, and different workshops and retreats through the year. So through the website, people can get in touch.
Great.
Everyone's welcome.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Roland. I really enjoyed talking to you today. And we'll be in touch.
Claire, thank you so much.
You've been listening to The Psychedelic Couch. For more episodes, please follow me on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts, and find me on Instagram at The Psychedelic Couch and at Claire Faulkner Therapy, where I will be keeping you up to date on the latest episodes and information surrounding all things therapy, psychedelics, and expanded states.